You know what time it is, buddy?
Adventure Tim. This is Adventure Tim. It's Adventure Tim time. In February 2012, then independent publisher Boom Studios began printing ongoing comic books, miniseries, specials, and graphic novels under their kids imprint Kaboom, based on Cartoon Network's increasingly popular hit Adventure Time. They made 200 of these comics. If I started a Goodreads while making this project, my book count this year would be unrivaled. These comics unintentionally shaped my love for the franchise, and won Eisner's and Harvey Awards, which are a big deal if you know what they are. Yet I barely see them discussed as a part of the brand's 15-year run. Today, we'll determine if these are more than a throwaway license tie-in, covering some of the best and worst material boasting the Adventure Time name from cover to cover. Yes, including that cover. There are few things I despise more. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps the channel out. Our quest begins with this image. This collection of clip art has formed the basis of hundreds of comic strips published online since 2003, with wordy roundabout arguments written by an undergraduate computer science student at the University of Toronto, Ryan North. Each strip follows the same structure. The T-Rex makes a statement, it may be acknowledged or criticized by the Dromaeosaurus, and it's questioned by the Utahraptor. Between that, anything goes. Maybe one of T-Rex's victims will chime in. Maybe time will suddenly pass. Maybe God has something to add. Maybe the conversation will continue off panel. So much can be explored and crammed into these 6 panels, and this helped the webcomic quietly grow an online following. It caught the attention of one Pendleton Ward, who was staffing up for a Cartoon Network series based on his Nickelodeon pilot for the Random Cartoon Shorts program, which had gone viral years prior.
It's adventure time, come on grab your friends, we'll go to very distant lands. Jake the dog and Ben the human, the fun will never end, it's adventure time.
North declined the offer to become a writer, not being able to move to Los Angeles at the time. However, while the first season was airing, he got a second chance. Boom editor Shannon Waters was familiar with Dinosaur Comics, and identified that the show was on a similar comedic wavelength, sharing his more genuine rendition of the lol random internet humor that plagued the early 2010s. Already being a huge fan, Ryan North accepted the offer to pen the tie-in comic, which was to be a straightforward adaptation of the cartoon. Kicking off with a 4-part arc about the Lich sucking up the Land of Oo into his magical bag of holding. North began to grasp the learning curve that came with writing comics for others to illustrate, coming to understand it as a deeply collaborative process akin to the storyboard-driven nature of the cartoon when working with Massachusetts-based artists Shelli, Paroline, and Braden. They were working on a handful of Ice Age comics for Kaboom around this time. I was going to insult their work here, but it's alright. This character design just disgusts me. I love their approximation of the House Adventure Time style, starting with a bang by recreating the theme song's tracking shot. As a heads up, every 4 to 5 issues was collected into trade paperbacks. So 1 through 4 is Volume 1, 5 through 10 is Volume 2, and 11 through 15 is Volume 3. That's what I mean when I'm referring to an issue or arc contained within a certain volume. It took a few issues for them to figure out the angles where the characters looked the most appealing, but by the second volume, the pair zeroed in on a slightly more exaggerated look. Their layouts are densely packed but never overwhelming, like repeating panels with tweaked details. As the run progressed, Paroline and Lamb tackled first-person perspectives, emoticons that replaced dialogue, pixel art, and non-linear storytelling with Choose Your Own Adventure Time. The use of colored arrows made it so easy for the paths to cleanly weave in and out of each other without forcing readers to search for another page or a panel, with few dead ends. Backtracking was never difficult. This makes issue 10 easily stand as the best single issue. The only thing these two artists did wrong was accidentally making Marceline white early on, but their error was fortunately fixed in reprints. Speaking of white, one element crucial to making Adventure Time the comic stand out from Adventure Time the show were the gutter comments written in light green text at the bottom of nearly every page, which would go on to be one of North's signatures as a writer. This is the space between the comic and the reader, so they can afford to add unnecessary context, post bonus comic strips, and break the fourth wall by mentioning the script or Ryan himself. It doesn't break the immersion because it's not being done through the characters. It allowed for rereadability if you happen to miss these footnotes footnotes. Many of these add an extra line for emphasis or specificity, and I enjoy how the tone ranges from considerate to snarky. There's even a helpful writing tip included: show readers more interesting things they'd rather see. Some of these I'm a little confused about, like under Finn, Jake, and Ice King opening a treasure chest, he wrote, do-do-do-dee, 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 da-da-da-da. Oh, wait, I get it. Thank you for your service, the guy who wrote this comic. North's excitement for writing these characters is contagious. I was delighted every time he brought someone new into a story. Any minor case of simplifying someone's personality for a joke can usually be overlooked, because the jokes usually land. Something he grew fond of was finding new ways to capture each character's voice. Ice King O'Vision depicts Simon's warped worldview in crayon, Finn and Jake have their own journal called the Adventure Tome, and Marcy makes up what she thought Bonnie was saying during a flashback from the princess. This culminates in issue 30, filled with strips written by the inhabitants of Ooh and curated by Marcy. PB phones it in and writes hers on graph paper, Finn and Jake's piece is unfinished because they left to fight a monster, and Lemongrab makes disturbing outsider art. The physical copy of this Marcel zine was even printed on non-gloss paper, a quality difficult to convey on camera, so it kinda feels like someone stapled it together by hand. As the cartoon progressed and began to expand and deepen its ensemble, the majority of this comic perpetually stayed in the realm of Finn and Jake's Season 2 and 3 era shenanigans, which makes sense, since it launched 5 days before the latter season concluded. Nowadays, I can appreciate the more abstract storytelling of Seasons 5 and 6, but when they were hitting airwaves, I preferred what was hitting comic shops instead. It was just comforting, more of the Adventure Time I was used to. It was definitely taking risks, but it did so without outgrowing the With Finn and Jake branding like the show did, which was present on its first 3 issues. These were also some of the only ones with covers that reflected the content of the interiors. Most Cartoon Network approved artwork is styled like a title card, or consists of stock poses, so I appreciate the fully illustrated on-model covers, even if I always wanted to see the boys fight multicolored, lumpy Space Princess clones. Nearly every issue had at least 1 or 2 variant covers. Some paid tribute to classic comics, some let their respective artists run absolutely wild, and some made me question how old Fiona is because of how she was drawn. Between the mentions of
Who wants to play video games?
And
Homies help homies, always.
I was caught off guard by nods to later developments like Ice King's backstory and Quiet Redemption, and references to Marceline and Bubblegum quietly becoming a couple, like them swapping clothes. The milestone issue 25 is even a love story about them told through 2 gems, starting 65 million years in the past. To answer a question posed in the gutter comments, yes, I did enjoy these Dinosaur Comics. Here we also learn that the Tree Fort is secretly a giant robot, and the security system takes control of Finn and Jake's house and begins attacking the heroes. I feel like I should be more angry about this. This raises the age-old question, are these comics canon? The short answer is no, because with the exception of this one cover for issue 51, the cartoon never acknowledges them directly. However, North largely designed his work to be canon until it could be contradicted. OKKO creator Ian Jones-Quartey coined a term for this media when he worked on Steven Universe, Level 2 canon. And by coined, I mean he is one of the only people I've ever heard use this term, but hey, it works. North had Penn Ward's number and texted the showrunner regularly, becoming aware of what the show was cooking up so he could steer clear of contradictions. I suspect that the only direct result of this is in issue 15. Finn says they set the ancient psychic tandem war elephant free, which he obtained with Jake in the Limit to explore the world and also his emotions. This basically happens in season 6's Something Big, but this issue was released a year before it aired, so you could read it as an unintentional spoiler.
You should be free, boy.
That being said, by issue 4, the main villain is killed off and the hole in the earth was filled in, so it was inevitable that these projects would go in different directions. It's an anime and manga sort of relationship. 3 approaches allowed the comic to feel like it was still making meaningful contributions to this universe. The first is new characters. This team loved cooking up outlandish princesses. My favorites are Desert Princess, Truth Field Projection Princess, and Skateboard Princess. Gotta give props to my aforementioned boy Adventure Tim, too. One of multiple, unexplained Finn and Jake doppelgangers, but the only one who's recurring. Next, we have adjacent developments. It's not important that Marceline got into computer hacking at some point because she was bored. It's the kind of detail that's likely to never come up in an episode, but she's 1,000 years old, so I can buy it. The third and final approach is time travel. You can have whatever you want happen in the future as long as the alternate timeline gets reset. This same logic is also how North got an arc where Finn and Jake die and become ghosts approved. Towards the end of his run, he even teased two characters living in a far future version of Ooh, Penelope and her tiger corn, Betty. Time travel was at the center of some of the best arcs this comic ever put out. Volume 2 has Finn and Jake accidentally plunge the Candy Kingdom into a dystopian apocalypse. Maybe it's the nostalgia talking, but sometimes you just want to see your favorite guys fight cool robots with cool weapons and cool mechs in cool outfits. And this comic delivered. The way our boys get out of this pickle perfectly toes the line between being stupid and being clever. Issue 9 has a sequence that blew my mind as a kid, where Finn and Jake travel back to an earlier issue illustrated by Mike Holmes, and even though he's not on art duties, they mimicked his style perfectly. They also return to the pilot and correct a continuity error, where the sleeping bag in the background disappears between shots. Here, future Finn and Jake take it, while leaving a note that explains why Penn changed his name to Finn. Apparently, Penn was a nickname, because he really liked pens. This was years before crossover, an entire episode basically devoted to fixing a single animation error. There's actually a few mentions of the pilot in here. Really shows how much of a fan North was.
How old are you?
I'm 12 years old.
I'm 28.
In Volume 7, Finn begins to wake up in the future without being able to recall years of his life after his memories are stolen by a new self-aware villain, the Numanoid. Thanks to the gutter comments, he doesn't feel out of place. There is a missed opportunity with a callback involving the Lich, and overall, I feel like the tone should have been darker considering how dire the situation becomes. Otherwise, North, Paroline, and Lamb are firing on all cylinders and cramming in what they do best. Deranged transformations, new princesses, and a bittersweet message about growing up. Through the flash forwards, we see that Marceline and PB have combined their kingdoms and rule as queens side by side, making them a couple without ever outright saying they're a couple. Even though that timeline is wiped out, future Bonnie confesses something to the princess and vampire in the present day. 5 years after it was published, North confirmed that the words whispered were, "Marceline still loves you," and "I love you, Marceline." A really cute way of making their relationship stick that still allowed the cartoon to do whatever it wanted with them. Just ignore when future Bubblegum kissed child Finn in an adult body. At the time that was written, no one knew how old and not straight she was yet. This secret is the only time something for children actually had a gay subliminal message. Why were the conservative watchdogs slacking? There's also the implication that in one flash forward, Finn is in a relationship with multiple partners, one of which may not be female. Maybe this is a reference to when he did the kissing equivalent of sleeping around with princesses? But this is a crazy tidbit to drop and never elaborate on. By far my favorite arc is Volume 4, where Finn, Jake, and the Ice King trek through dungeons created by the Ice King himself, Hudson Abadir, and the Lich. Surrounding the incredible joke about IK's Hall of Justice turning out to be a Hall of Just Ice, and a reference to Slaughterhouse 5, there's a crushing look into Simon's warped worldview, degrading memory, the past he struggles to move on from, and the genuine bond he has with his new buds. One of the best stories about one of Adventure Time's best characters. This is also where I realized that North's rendition of Jake the dog is a huge part of why he's one of my favorite characters. He can seamlessly slide from supportive to selfish, and he's normally so laid back that it stands out when he gets pissed. The dog's craziest transformations can also be found here. Jake turns into a bathysphere, splits his mouth into 3, and nothing will ever top my beloved Fractal Glob Jake. We cannot let the Power Scalers find out about him. With the main duo in particular, there's lots of little asides where they take a second to compliment their pals or allude to their history together. It does a lot to make their brotherly bond seem believable. The quality of Ryan North's arcs is so consistently high that even the volumes I like the least, numbers 3 and 6, are still fairly solid. Sometimes the pacing of a single issue meanders, or the tone manages to be a little too silly for me to take the conflict seriously, but I still recommend both of these. You don't want to miss seeing Finn and Jake fuse, or BMO getting hijacked by a Wojak who shares a face with character designer Phil Rynda, an inside joke that became the centerpiece of a computer virus storyline. Issue 35 marks the end of the comic's original creative team with a Rashomon-style one-off about all of the major characters and Party God solving the mystery of Lumpy Space Princess's lost star. It starts with an illustration of the credits background to parallel issue 1 and concludes with a Mad Magazine-style fold-in. It's a nice bonus that rounds out a run that couldn't afford to be as fleshed out as its source material, but managed to be as emotionally complex and arguably funnier while remaining mostly accessible to unfamiliar readers. This was the first comic I read and collected month to month, starting with being super confused when I opened up issue 14 and was treated to the final piece of a 4-part arc. But that's gotta be a universal experience with this medium. Every comic has that one issue with the robotic Wojak. It was really strange when it happened in Invincible Iron Man. I've never been more excited for an ongoing book, and have vivid memories of losing sleep over waiting for issue 20, reading issues during long drives, or getting my parents to take me to the comic shop because there was an Indian restaurant with good takeout nearby, and a poorly translated slogan, "The best Indian restaurant I have ever been." Unfortunately, I am now too woke to find this funny. If you can only read one thing I cover in this video, make it this terrific 3-year run. It found a way to make the Land of Ooh its own. However, these stories only took up about 15 to 16 of the 22 pages allotted to each issue. What filled out the remainder of these comics? In the first issue of Adventure Time, Tree Trunks dies. Ryan North wasn't her biggest fan, so she was quote-unquote killed off and didn't return until after his run ended. However, flip over to the second half of Adventure Time #1 and Tree Trunks is alive and well and depressed in the backup story, My Cider the Mountain. Editor Shannon Waters wanted to platform independent and online cartoonists whose work usually wouldn't be on the shelves of comic shops by handing them a few pages to do whatever they'd like in the Land of Ooh. It was intended to introduce kids to the vast amount of storytelling potential that the medium held, snuck into the back of a tie-in. It also honored the spirit of the animated series, which became known for scooping up talent from the indie comics world like Michael DeForge, Luke Pearson, and Polly Gao, who did a bit of work for Boom before or while they were designers and storyboard artists. While the main chunk of the book by North, Paroline, and Lamb was on model, typically starred Finn and Jake, and told plots with definitive beginnings and endings under a single vision, the backups were able to capture pretty much everything else that made Adventure Time, collected in trade paperbacks as Sugary shorts. They could have faithful art by future Big City Greens creators Shane and Chris Houghton, or alt comics legend Paul Pope could draw Finn with a green striped sweater next to this nightmare abomination. They starred obscure characters like Party Pat, Sir Slicer, and the Demon Cat. They could hit a wider range of tones, from creepy to mundane to unsettling, never feeling restricted by the cartoon's canon. They added a great dash of variety to every issue. But after the first year or so, these shorts started to feel hit or miss. It became clear who was familiar with this world and characters, and who was taking an easy paycheck. Though, in all fairness, I know from posts by Natasha Allegri, whose work I'll touch on later, that Boom's pay rates around this period were low, and they took advantage of many desperate artists. This is probably how we got a clever Princess Bubblegum story, where she teams up with the one-off Y-Wolves, and one where Finn and Jake fight the princess's supposed scientific rival, Dr. Broccoli, who feels ripped from a different cartoon. Plots where the boys meet or fight OCs were usually carried by the art. I don't expect these commissioned cartoonists to have an encyclopedic knowledge of AT, especially because they couldn't have known where the show was going when they wrote Ice King crushing on Marceline multiple times before their backstory together was revealed. However, the inconsistencies stick out. There's other humans besides Finn, other vampires besides Marceline, and Marceline herself could be seen unprotected, out in the sun. One story sees the return of a Ryan North created character, Water Princess. I can't tell if they were included as a cool callback, or because they have a wiki page. As they went on, the backups that did something unexpected with the page layout were the ones that stuck out to me. I can't bring myself to call them bad, but they definitely devolved into being more style over substance. I enjoyed discovering all of these diverse reinterpretations, but they feel a little inconsequential when read back to back. At least the main stories in the ongoing book had the illusion of growth and were reliably good. The backups made it feel like I got $4 worth of content out of every issue, but I definitely remember less and less about them as I got further into my reread. Fortunately for me, these indie-driven shorts were also the basis for 10 annuals that began to roll out starting in 2013. Some of these are loosely based on a season like summer or winter. Typically thin stories, terrific expressions or illustrations, and a few deep-cut continuity nods I appreciate. One standout is Heart, wherein Marceline helps a sleeping Princess Bubblegum. The art holds such a melancholy tone, but the tender relationship expressed here without saying a word is impressive. Then there's Secret Stash, where Gravedigger Starchy's mustache goes missing. It just gets uglier with every panel. This is from the first horror-themed spooktacular issue. Get ready for a lot of ooh puns, so mission accomplished, I guess. But that's not as scary as the last short it contains, a preview of Steven Universe. I actually thought it was cool whenever the backup would advertise another Cartoon Network comic. I could have used a little more brand synergy. As they went on, the specials became anthologies centered around a single character like Gunther, Peppermint Butler, BMO, and Marshall Lee, in an issue that's a Comixology exclusive. In an issue that was once a Comixology exclusive. There isn't a huge jump in quality, but having a cohesive central focus made these later issues feel more satisfying to read on their own. You get all these different shades of each cast member, certainly helped by the fact there was over 6 years and 200 plus episodes of material to draw from. For instance, BMO Bonanza brings out the robot's childlike nature, curiosity, and imagination, drawing direct inspiration from BMO Lost, Football, and BMO Noir. Some had more influence than others. I think these specials were at their best when they contained a single story that had a whole issue to breathe. The 2014 annual featured Baby Fiona's first adventure to rescue Prince Gumball from the evil Ice Queen on her birthday. It was published with a horizontal landscape layout, drawn with large watercolor panels that give off a storybook vibe. It all takes place at night, so the bright colors really pop. It's a case where I think the blunt dialogue and simple plotline works well with the issue's visual gimmick. I'm also a fan of the 2015 Spooktacular, a tie-in for the Stakes miniseries by board artist Hannah Kay. Through an expressive and sketchy style, it flashes back to when Marceline tracked down and killed the Moon, a healing vampire. It's inconsequential, but provides an interesting look into Marcy's psyche as she speaks to visions of her younger self. She feels compelled to protect the humans that fear her, knowingly being in over her head, but dedicated to never giving up. 2 limited edition mini-comics were exclusive to the Boom Studios booth at San Diego Comic-Con. In the adventure unfolds, Finn and Jake try to defeat Choose Goose in a rhyming competition, leading the fowl to spawn multiple heads like a hydra. From there, the page folds out, expanding to fit their massive battle. The comic is pretty hard to come by nowadays, so watching this behind-the-scenes video will have to do. While gimmicky, it does feel like a one-of-a-kind handmade product. And creator John Chad would go on to do a 6-foot accordion-style comic for a regular show, and a Gumball comic lodged inside a Super Nintendo cartridge. He probably murdered so many innocent copies of games like, I don't know, Al Unser Jr.'s Road to the Top. 2018 saw the more traditionally printed PB and Marcy, where the pair attend a concert together. Bubblegum tries to replace the band shirt that Marceline was revealed to have given her during Season 3's What Was Missing, fighting off harpies in a desperate attempt to recreate the past. It illustrates how much the couple had grown, weeks before they officially got together on screen. I enjoy the range of emotions that PB hits in Cat Lay's art, using the princess's panicked state of mind to drive the tone. Probably the most underrated piece I'm covering here, and I could only access it through photos someone took on their phone. If you want to see a writer or artist stretch their legs with their own vision of Adventure Time, well then you're gonna love the next part of the video I coincidentally decided to discuss next. In July 2012, Boom Studios began to publish their first AT miniseries. These would be 6-issue runs, 2 released every year, created by even more indie cartoonists that told long-form stories, usually focused on side characters. These arcs weren't attempting to perfectly fit into the established canon of the cartoon, but didn't stray too far from it either. I'm just gonna go through them all one by one, starting with the first 9 that debuted alongside the animated series.
Marceline and the Scream Queens.
Princess Bubblegum manages Marceline's band as they tour the land of Ooh, as the vampire feels pressure to keep the band afloat, takes tabloid criticism to heart, and lets her anxiety consume her. Author Meredith Gran is known for her webcomic, Octopus Pie, and this is a good introduction to slice-of-life comics for kids. Not outright mature, but slower, more dialogue-driven, and drama-focused compared to the main book. It does differ from the show in how this dude looks straight out of Beavis and Butthead, and PB is straight. She crushes on a DeviantArt Adventure Time human OC. There's also the comic relief ghost drummer Bongo. For a few years, the last page of both the ongoing and spin-off books would have a popular character tease the next issue. They had the balls to suggest that Bongo was on the same level as LSB or BMO. You did nothing wrong. But I hate you, Bongo. The emotion in this arc still comes through. The Vampire Queen's frustration is understandable, and this is notably the first piece of media to focus on dissecting her relationship with Bubblegum, who holds a clashing, scientific-driven approach to music and performing. My only complaint is that BMO and Tree Trunks join the Scream Queens on tour and barely say a word. They do appear on the creative covers, many spoofing famous albums. Grant's art also captures each new venue well, along with the feeling of attending an exciting concert without any sound. The big bubble eyes she gives the cast are a fun touch too. There's also a few backup stories. Sometimes they're vaguely connected to the band, but they add to the feeling that this is Marceline's own comic. You get a crazy-looking BMO, set up for a future miniseries, a naked Marcy, and the appearance of a shirt that would later show up in one of the final episodes. Marceline and the Scream Queen starts these miniseries well, and while not as narratively compelling,
Fiona and Cake
is a worthy follow-up. This hit a month before the Bad Little Boy episode aired, what felt like the height of these gender swaps' popularity. I was curious how these comics would make them separate and appealing in their own right. There's two answers: sexism and whimsy. Fiona is ostracized for her gender, having cooties, or gets hit on, mostly in backups. Some authors didn't even try to account for the gimmick. Lady Lemongrab is Lemongrab with eyelashes. I was really taken aback when I read Marshall Lee's stories that characterized him as a little more guarded and competitive, like a version of Marceline that hadn't started rekindling her relationship with PB yet, and was stuck around season 2 or 3, which is when these gender swaps were invented. It's honestly something that the first season of the Max series confronted, having the cast become more akin to the characters we watched develop for 10 seasons. Despite that, Butterscotch Butler can still detect Marshall Lee's homosexuality. What Natasha Allegri does here is playing to how this story is all in Ice King's head. It occasionally meanders to focus on a side character or branches off into a fairy tale, with one interlude reminding me of the jellyfish song from an early Bee and Puppy Cat episode. The big panels use negative space well, the flowing cursive speech bubbles are cute, and it all adds a dreamlike quality to the occasionally bleak story of Fiona meeting and rescuing Flame Prince and his lion pride from the Ice Queen's spell, a warped retelling of one of Finn's adventures. I can't imagine this version of Flame Prince being voiced by Hannibal Buress though.
Listen, I just came in here to use the bathroom, man. I thought you had to check out a book first to pee. Actually, I don't even have a library card.
Fun fact, Fiona's new sword, slightly less skinny design, and handsome lumpy space prince all made their way into the next Fiona and Cake episode after this spin-off dropped. It's another tiny example of the show acknowledging this adaptation, but only selectively, since Ice Queen got really dead at the end of the miniseries.
Candy Capers.
Finn and Jake are missing in action, so Peppermint Butler tasks randomized pairs of characters to take their place through a Royal Hero draft as he searches for their whereabouts with Cinnamon Bun. I like the team-up gimmick that groups together Marceline and Tree Trunks, LSP and Lemongrab, and finally Ice King and Susan Strong, and sends them off on mini mysteries. The two creative leads know how to write these guys, and there's a handful of obscure appearances. Like apparently the drop ball guy is dead now. But this lacks focus. Were Peppa and CB popular enough to market this miniseries, but not popular enough to carry it? This feels like at least two different comics crammed into one. The noir style promised by the covers is barely present, and the main mystery is too much of a farce for me to care. Pep-Butt says it himself. This entire investigation was a waste of time. Ian McGinty's cartoony art really carries Candy Capers. These Burgoons at the Casino Castle have super snazzy designs. I recall him doing lots of art for these comics over the years, so I'm looking forward to seeing him return.
The flip side.
Now, the flip side was the only miniseries that caught my attention when it was announced, promising high fantasy quests that would turn what you know about Adventure Time upside down, after Finn and Jake take a listing from the reverse side of a quest board. In reality, the boys are plopped into cliché settings, facing arbitrary obstacles to complete a single drawn-out goal. But uh-oh, because this is a reverse quest, reverses will happen at random. Like, characters will swap bodies and be mildly inconvenienced, or the dead will be brought back to life. It plays as an attempt to capture the franchise's gonzo nature without giving it purpose, dropping in new plot devices in order to fill all 6 issues. There is at least one neat concept or funny bit in each chapter. I won't complain about seeing Finn and Jake reenact the JFK assassination, but was spreading high school gossip. Kudos to the license holders for letting the art style stray from the source material style for the whole arc too, being sketchier with slightly more realistic proportions. Upon its release, I was gifted the trade paperback for the flip side. I was just as bored and frustrated with it then as I am now. Without a doubt, it's the low point of these comics, but props for validating my nostalgia, I guess.
Banana Guard Academy.
On the literal flip side, we have Banana Guard Academy, partially penned by series head writer Ken Osborne. Princess Bubblegum opens the Banana Guard Academy up to non-bananas, allowing the likes of Tree Trunks, Peppermint Butler, Mr. Cupcake, and a slew of other Candy Kingdom citizens to work towards achieving their dreams under the eye of the stern Commandant. Most of this book lacks a meaningful conflict or a protagonist, but it's got a Stripes-inspired, hangoutable nature to it, and a dedication to its cobbled-together cast of underdogs. The cadets have differing motivations for joining the new program, insecurities they express while frozen at Ice King's hotel, and test results that are all bad in their own unique ways. At first, it was strange to see the joke self-insert of showrunner Adam Muto, Gingerbread Muto, be treated like a main character and watch Mr. Cupcake be denied the right to be a banana guard and get hosed down on the street like a civil rights protester. But issue 4 is where things go off the rails. Root Beer Guy is a minor player here, having become the captain of the Banana Guards at the end of his Spotlight episode. However, this comic launched 6 days after the premiere of Something Big. In this episode, Root Beer Guy dies. That's a problem. How's the comic going to respond to this? Well, the solution is simple. Peppermint Butler briefly leaves his fellow cadets because, and I quote, "something big is going on." Then Root Beer Guy is dead on the next page. Crisis averted. Playing it off as a minor inconvenience was an excellent call. From there, the miniseries focuses on split timelines, saving the multiverse from a fracture in a dimensional portal, cults worshipping the dead, and fighting yet another robot apocalypse in the future. There's still room for all of the cadets to receive solid arcs, despite the story becoming slightly disjointed, and I think that's why Banana Guard Academy succeeds. I assure you that this is all 100% canon with the cartoon.
Marceline Gone Adrift.
Meredith Grant is back to describe the story of PB working to retrieve Marceline after the princess hurls her into space to protect her kingdom. And comparatively, this miniseries is far more depressing. The tone is balanced by introducing colonies of alien pups and sassy leaves, a giant cinnamon bun, and a skeezy record producer hoping to profit off of Marceline's apparent death. Between that, there's a lot of silence and uncertainty that the two protagonists face, cutting between the past and present. Seeing the first time Bubblegum and Marceline drifted apart, and how facing that again motivates Bonnie to rescue her love. The structure reminds me a lot of the Distant Land special Obsidian. Both of Grant's arcs do. This is actually the rare opportunity where I like the comics take better. It's more structurally sound, Bonobo gets more growth, and none of the side characters steal the spotlight. I adore Marceline Gone Adrift, man. It trimmed the fat of the Scream Queens arc, is dripping with emotion, and feels more mature than it actually is. It was one of the first pieces of Adventure Time media committed to digging into this relationship, and one of the best to ever do it, even if it couldn't be explicitly romantic yet.
Fiona and Cake, Card Wars.
This one throws two big aspects of the AT brand together, as Cake fiercely competes in a Card Wars tournament, predating the debut of one in the cartoon, rising to compete against the menacing Flute Master. The first issue actually came packaged with an exclusive card for the tie-in game, kind of like how other floppies were sold with action figures and dolls. There's that brand synergy I was looking for. Because this is an alternate universe, there's no limit to how the card game can be depicted. So we get these exciting illustrations that highlight the dangers of a battle game that physically happens in front of you. As the stakes grow higher, we learn why Cake is so determined to win, and how Fiona attempts to mend the rift that grows between the besties, while her cat is busy preparing for the tournament. Prince Gumball also has a great character turn. His nonchalant attitude really shines here. The cartoony art, filled with some of the best Cake drawings ever, boosts this typical underdog story. Pretty middle of the road as far as these miniseries go, but still a good read.
Ice King.
One unmined pocket of ooh that the comics finally tackle here is the secret society of wizards that Ice King tangles with when Gunter is kidnapped by the Dark Magister Templi. He abandons his old squad, despite Leafman's persuasiveness, and joins a gang of manipulative posers, getting distracted by having his coolness be validated. The plot is predictable, and for the first few issues it felt like an extended backup story. Between the mall shopping montage and visits to wizard basements, it's easy to forget that the setting is apocalyptic. Conversely, Ice King's aloofness is on point, and his new friends are bizarre and just casual enough to fit into this world. The art looks like something he'd draw, despite the title character usually looking like an elderly gnome. It takes a while to dive into Simon's psyche, but this miniseries has an excellent understanding of his fear of abandonment, and how the crown has warped his perception of reality. Each issue begins with a page of Fiona and Cake that slowly turn darker, interrupted by Ice King's intrusive thoughts. Board artist Lyle Partridge penned the story, so this interpretation of the character is up to date with when this dropped around Season 7. This comic might be the only time we see him interact with Simon too. Ice King grew on me over time, quietly becoming one of the better miniseries Boom put out. I'd recommend starting with this one if you want storytelling that feels ripped right out of the cartoon's later years.
Adventure Time Cross Regular Show.
Regular Show was the second most prolific Cartoon Network property Kaboom licensed out in the 2010s, generating about 70 issues and graphic novels. I always saw these as sister shows, since they aired new episodes in the same block together for years. So I'm glad we got to see the land of Ooh and the land of wherever Regular Show takes place collide, even if it's not animated. A new foe, the Master of Division, is turning the Candy Kingdom against itself. Finn, Jake, Ice King, Marceline, and Lumpy Space Princess enter Princess Bubblegum's unending portal of limitless power in search of the ultimate weapon, the Power Keyboard, which has been scattered into 4 heavily guarded pieces by Skips that the heroes from both universes must band together to retrieve. I think the biggest negative is that each pair of characters won't stop fighting with each other. Finn and Jake are cursed for the first half, but Wrigley is so stubborn and rude towards Mordecai. I could see this attitude being a natural product of his character if it didn't span the entire arc. I don't think these 6 chapters manage their time very wisely either. Plot points like Bubblegum turning evil happen off screen, High Five Ghost girlfriend Celia gets more to do than Pops or Muscle Man, and this wild plot thread about Simon returning and speculating that they've actually traveled back in time instead of to another world just doesn't get resolved. The art by Matty DiMeo isn't as on model as I prefer, but it is bursting with energy. The use of 2-page spreads split in half before the characters cross over in issue 1 is expertly done. The pixel art is even modeled after how it looked in volume 3 of Adventure Time. Similarly, the covers that parody the specific first issues of both books are rad too. The main covers by Phil Murphy were all spreads that succeeded in getting me to buy each issue twice. Well, almost succeeded. The choice of characters and iconography isn't completely accurate to the arc, but they're a nice extra bit of fan pandering. I got my issue 2s signed by the writer Conor McCreary at New York Comic Con, where he asked me what I thought of the first part, and I said I thought it was okay. He assured me it would pick up in quality, and I think it did by the final issue. Also, I never read the ending until now. Even with some ideas being dropped or moments going unexplained, the finale brings the whole event together. Entering Ooh has given the park staff appropriate superpowers that they utilize in a final battle that really feels big. The reveal of who was behind the Master Division's mask is a perfect deep cut to AT lore, although it will 100% go over the heads of casual fans. The Regular Show crossover is probably the most flawed miniseries on the surface, but it's never boring and gives you most of what you want to see. My favorite panel is just seeing Benson yell in front of the Candy Kingdom. This one isn't far behind though. Going back to the ongoing book, issue 36 of Adventure Time brought in a new creative team. Writer Christopher Hastings was also known for a long-running webcomic with timely internet humor that still holds up, The Adventures of Dr. McNinja. If I didn't have 200 comics to read, I'd give it a look, but fortunately for me, the title is self-explanatory. This is very much a continuation of Ryan North's run. More Finn and Jake focused plots, more of the one-shots and 4-issue arcs with backup structure, more tiptoeing around the cartoon's continuity, and the tongue color is slightly different now, they ruined it! The only surface level difference is the inclusion of these fake to be continued and previously on segments that tease vague concepts for future issues or depict events previously unseen by the readers. It's like a splash of Arrested Development in my Adventure Time. Hastings wasn't sure how long he'd be on the book for, so maybe that's why his first storyline in Volume 8 feels like it's trying to cram in as much as possible. Finn and Jake are suddenly in an unexplained dungeon on the moon, then all of Ooh forgets how to make food, then the cosmic candy god Arctothak is summoned, then this hipster rooster Alan is introduced. I'm not complaining about him though. There's a theme of maturity, with Finn learning to not let his new sword define him, which he can only use when he has perfect health, but it doesn't get to receive enough focus. In the meantime, he does a lot of whining, but otherwise everyone is pretty in character. Issue 38 accidentally came dangerously close to retreading Everything's Jake, an episode where Magic Man spawns a civilization on top of Jake's body. This aired 3 months before the release of an issue where Finn encounters a civilization inside of Jake's body, leading to some last-minute rewrites. Hastings had Jake say, "Never been in this part of my body before," and bam! Now it's uncharted territory. This is where the arc hits its stride, but generally there's too much going on and it leaves a poor first impression. That being said, this run gets very good very fast. The self-contained issue 40 has Magic Man speak directly to the audience to tease an interactive element where he'll grant their wish, creating convoluted rules for how they're chosen as disaster strikes at a fancy gala in the background. It's followed up by having issue 45 wrap the story around the top and bottom of its pages, virtually doubling the length as the boys traverse a tent of amusements, hosted by an obviously shady carnival wizard. Love seeing this pair get annoyed together. The two sides of each page communicate and comment on each other, only separated by a mirror. This is one I recommend tracking down the physical copy of. That version is easier to follow. This crazy layout was constructed by Zachary Sterling and Phil Murphy, who had worked on various other Adventure Time graphic novels and covers for Kaboom. Their art brings in bigger panels, more 1 or 2 page spreads, and scenic views that give the dialogue room to breathe, slowing down the pace but drawing more attention to the atmosphere. Murphy did 2 issues on his own, and the posing is a little stiffer and the proportions are sloppier, but they still came out alright considering that the deadline was probably pretty tight. I was enjoying how issue 45 manipulated space and time until it ended with a to be continued that's never followed up on. Still bothers me a decade later. Same goes for how the wraparound cover was also used for a random compilation DVD. One of Christopher Hastings' goals was to take the franchise to new places. He achieved this by digging deep into select genres. In Volume 9, Finn and Jake are enlisted into Peppermint Butler's Secret Service as secret agents of sweets, secret warriors eliminating enemies, and other tricky situations. The number of meticulously crafted twists and turns it takes breaks from the more free-form storytelling I expect from AT, but there's just enough humdrum and offbeat elements surrounding it. You got the obligatory weapons, disguises, and conspiracies, but the high society party being spied on is hosted by Party God. The foreign group being infiltrated consists of a bear army groomed by the King of Ooh. Hastings' run immediately comes into its own, with the gutter comments being quietly dropped by the final chapter. As an added bonus, I finally know what a terrorist attack on the Candy Kingdom looks like. This author also loves bringing in high-concept science fiction in ways that cleverly play with the canon. Volume 10 finally brings Finn and Jake's sister Gata into the comic. It only took 46 issues, but she's finally here. I don't understand why our guys are so confused. She's always been here. It's not like Jake's dad Joshua trapped Gata in an alternate dimension when she was a baby because her mouth was a portal that could unleash a powerful monster and thought demons that reveal Marceline's gay thoughts. Or maybe she was flat out erased from existence? It's a very heartwarming arc. Gata becomes real likable real fast, but the specifics of her return are a little overcomplicated and could have been more clear. Same with when Finn is sucked into a scrapbook populated by memories of his past incarnations. The way it's drawn, it looks like the world is fading around him. This is from the 50th issue and the first one illustrated by Ian McGinty. I barely noticed a difference when he took over, but he adds a cartoony edge to expressions and new character designs. He loves including what I can only describe as rage comic faces. They're strange to see over 5 years after Penn Ward banned Finn from having expressions with eye whites after season 1, but that exaggeration fits how self-aware Hastings' writing has become. McGinty also dropped in a few cameos from Candy Capers into crowd shots or as a repurposed design. Besides a few Marceline and the Scream Queens posters, you never really saw that kind of connective tissue across all these different branches of this adaptation, so I dig it. Going back to the milestone issue 50, it engages with Finn's past lives like Shoko, a butterfly, and the Catalyst Comet. The essence of the Lich goats him into becoming a hero in his prior incarnations, but it leads Finn to accept who he is now. 2 lives added to Finn's past are Davy, who works at a launch facility on Earth, and Penelope, that adventurer we caught glimpses of in Ryan North's run. The show leaves it open as to who Finn and Jake reincarnate into, but here, mystery solved. Speaking of death, Jake spends the next story traversing the 27th Dead World on his own, without his powers, to stop an evil, youth-stealing governor. Back in the day, I thought the town name of Costa Rica was filled with too much joy and whimsy for me to handle. But I really warmed up to the silliness on display, especially with the mechanics of this ghostly setting. Jake's desperation to complete his quest in order to save Finn from permanently going senile makes him easy to root for too. It's nice to see him finally get his own arc in the mainline book. This is about halfway through Christopher Hastings' stint on Adventure Time, and it's where he started to feel comfortable fleshing out his own lore, fitting in ideas from previous arcs as he went along. Penelope's Ooh has been destroyed by 3 gods of destruction based on the candy, fire, and slime elementals. These include Arctothak and Angzada, a being who, in Volume 12, possessed Bimo and transformed you into personalized genre-based fantasies. The drawings of Jake when he gets possessed are so sick. Elsewhere in this storyline, Neptune's made into a terrible friend who lies to Finn and Jake and forces Bimo into danger so that he can pretend to be a hero. It plays up his need for validation. This comic cares more about referencing Mario Paint than Neptune, and I respect that. Nearly every arc has contributed something leading up to Volume 13, the end of Hastings' run, which makes it feel increasingly plot-driven. It turns out that Finn is the one who built the moon dungeon we saw all the way back in issue 36, sent back in time to protect it from intruders for thousands of years until Penelope can fulfill its prophecy. There's a wealth of exposition and the ending is a tad abrupt, but it's still a deeply satisfying end to 5 years of the book, and one of its best arcs. I had too much love for what came before it to give this run a fair shake back in the day, but with a decade of hindsight, I'm impressed at how it found fresh ways to expand the Adventure Time mythos, even if it didn't hit the same highs. Hastings prefaced this final issue of his by saying, "I had a wonderful time on this book, but I've basically gotten to do everything I wanted to on it, and it's time to let the next person on." And that's exactly what Boom Studios did, 5 times within 1 year. In April 2013, the third pillar of Kaboom's Adventure Time lineup was introduced. Original graphic novels, ranging from about 70 to 140 pages in length, tackled by a revolving door of talent. At first, they were rendered in black and white, textured with bent day dots. By the 4th release, they were colored traditionally, but maintained larger panel sizes and fewer speech bubbles to give each volume a faster pace than the single issues. Compared to the miniseries, I found them to be more consistent, but not as high quality. Let's cover these with a lightning round, is what I planned to do before I wrote these entries, and they wound up being as long as the ones for the miniseries.
Playing with fire.
Flame Princess traverses a dungeon with Jake to retrieve Finn's soul from a fortune-telling dragon, digging into her anger, her evil heritage, her rash nature, and a love for Finn that she confesses to him. I don't think the team knew that the pair would break up 3 months after this release. After they separated, FP would start to get solo spotlight episodes. But this feels like the first time we don't see her through Finn's eyes. Flame Princess proves that she can be just as great of a hero as the boy she looks up to, striking a balance between following the rules and doing things her own way. Although Jake did not have as much patience as Finn had when dungeon crawling with her.
Race it to the next monster!
Whoa, whoa!
What?
That's not how you do things in a dungeon.
Playing with Fire did a thorough job hitting upon every facet of Flame Princess. And the chibi, manga-inspired illustrations by Zachary Sterling really sell its romantic nature. Highly recommend this one. Gave the graphic novels a strong identity right out of the gate.
Pixel Princesses.
Bimo wishes to be a princess, so Magic Man sucks Lumpy Space Princess, Embio Princess, Breakfast Princess, Muscle Princess, and Turtle Princess, the official description forgot about Skeleton Princess, into the console, and they must win Bimo's games to escape. Yeah, it's just Scooby-Doo in the cyber chase. And I'm only saying this because both consider a Roman Coliseum arena to be a classic level trope. I appreciate seeing these semi-obscure characters get fleshed out, like I did not know Breakfast Princess knew what Canadian bacon is, or Canada for that matter. I hope they're still around in this post-apocalypse. I'm not big on LSP's arc of not feeling like she's a real princess, only because there's at least one episode and one comic arc devoted to it. But there's still some fun character moments and tasteful gamer references, even if Pixel Princesses feels more disposable than its predecessor.
Seeing Red.
During an Abadir family reunion, Marceline discovers her dad sold her axe base and traverses the Nightosphere to retrieve it, with Jake by her side. I appreciate the attempt to give Hudson and the axe backstories, give Marcy a childhood bestie, and give this nightmare realm more of an awkward and casual vibe. Playing with Fire took bigger, less predictable swings with its character work, but the somewhat canon world building of Seeing Red still helps it stick out. I will say, I wasn't expecting the bellhop to have a massive crush on Jake and ask him out off screen. Personally, I don't blame the guy. I saw what Jake was wearing at the nightclub.
Bittersweets.
Princess Bubblegum and Peppermint Butler venture to neighboring monarchies to recharge her kingdom's power supply, only to realize that her allies have been stealing from each other. Thankfully, the sweet and innocent princess is here to sort out their complex conflict by sciencing an easy solution together. It would be far more in character for PB to join in and sabotage other kingdoms to protect her own. There was a whole episode about that very thing.
I'm PB. I spy on everybody. No big D. You're cold, PB.
I guess Bubblegum was probably depicted this way to contrast with the outwardly evil Peppermint Butler. It's the most entertaining part of the comic, even if it's a side of him she never found out about in the cartoon. The three societies introduced here are creative, but there's so much jumping from one to another. I know Adventure Time was inspired by Zelda, but I didn't know that meant there was going to be backtracking. Not even a Breaking Bad quote can save Bittersweets from being my least favorite graphic novel so far.
Yes, science!
Grables Schmables.
Finn and Jake stumble upon a cube that beams them into short stories featuring their friends that they can't interact with, all connected by a mysterious trail that's stealing their precious items. There's some good gags, including some nerdy ones about CD burning and video quality, but I think the anthology format they're doing works better in a shorter 11-minute package. The plot also resolves itself. Finn and Jake are mostly bystanders. All things considered, the book is fine, but it made me want to rewatch Grables 1000 Plus from Season 6. It aired a month later, which is funny because they share a similar twist ending, but the episode has a far more compelling way of connecting the shorts together with a through line.
Mask Mayhem.
Jake and Bimo celebrate Masquerade Day throughout the land of Ooh as they track down a prankster who's ruining each event. The mystery is very subdued and kind of convoluted, lacking the atmosphere that makes a lot of Adventure Time's mystery-based episodes work. I guess this functions as a low-key way to get more hang time with the cast and see them wear cute costumes, but I didn't think there was enough here to sustain over 140 pages. This does mark the last graphic novel to include backup stories by Meredith McLaren, featuring a day in the life of side characters. They're mostly silent with this 4-panel and 1 illustration format, so it's easy to fly through these without realizing they're about 20 pages long. Having the same author do 5 backups back to back gave them room to experiment with this style too. It's a welcome change after reading tons of throwaway shorts about the Lich turning into a sandwich to trap Finn or something. There's not much to these, but the visual storytelling can often be a highlight when the rest of the book is lacking.
The Four Castles.
The next 3 were written by Josh Trujillo, whose resume includes the Batman FaZe Clan comic and Hogwarts Legacy. Fortunately, the fast pace, varied settings, and character dialogue is all on point. The devious Guildmaster tricks Finn and Jake into stealing 4 artifacts for him, which tears the 2 brothers apart. It's a little forced to see them get mad at each other, but their apology and reunion is still satisfying. Definitely one of the best Atagoons I've read so far. Zachary Sterling and Phil Murphy from the second run of the ongoing book are back on art, and will illustrate all but 2 of the remaining graphic novels. The more saturated colors allows their work on the 4 castles to really shine. This panel of Muscle Princess does not look official though.
President Bubblegum.
The setup of a race for president of Ooh, sparked by a long-lost constitution, is used as an excuse for the humor to run wild. There's gags about fact-checking during debates, smear ads, not letting the elderly vote, bribes, child labor, and a literal shadow government. There's a real Simpsons vibe to the way this utilizes the whole cast for quick jokes and does blatant satire. Sometimes the Ryan North issues would have sign gags, throwaway joke characters, or an inaccurate fantasy. Those doppelgangers I mentioned before have real Lester and Eliza energy, but said vibe is more noticeable in a story about rejecting authority. It undoubtedly puts comedy over character, like PB probably should have gone a little more power mad, but there's enough references to obscure characters like the Tree Witch and the House People to make this feel like an alternate take on Adventure Time instead of a mischaracterization. It makes President Bubblegum worth seeking out. That and the assassination attempt. Yes, this was timed to release with the 2016 US election. Finn's right. Why would anyone ever want to kill a president?
Brain robbers.
Tree Trunks accompanies Slumpy Space Princess on a hunt for the treasure of the ruthless zombie twins, who also open and steal Finn's brain when he, Jake, and Bimo follow the pair in secret. This is Josh Trujillo's last book, and unfortunately his least engaging. The villains lack presence, although Guildmaster returning is pretty funny. I feel like characters literally losing their minds is a little too goofy for AT. Not much is done with it until the climax. Still, Brain Robbers stands out as a riff on Western and road trip tropes, and the interactions are solid. LSP shields TT from an attack, and uses this to justify swinging her around like a hammer. I would probably do the same thing if Tree Trunks was real.
Islands.
In a prequel to the Season 8 miniseries penned by staff writer Ashley Birch, we learn that Two Bread Tom, the human leader Marceline assisted back in the Stakes episodes, helped discover, cultivate, and protect what would become Finn's birthplace of Founders Island. The sketchier line art and cramped layouts give the visuals a distinct flavor, differentiating it from all of the comics taking place in the present. I like that his worldview conflicts with Jo, the girl with the rabbit hat. Marceline acts as her spirit guide, bleeding over from memories of the time they spent together. A very natural way to get a recognizable character in there. She becomes a self-sufficient adventurer, favoring freedom over security. It's a great parallel to Finn and Minerva's mindsets. But as soon as it's introduced, the story ends. It's only 70 pages too, plus a brief backup. About half as long as the average Adventure Time graphic novel. Was this downsized so it could coincide with the launch of the miniseries, even though it was released 2 months before it aired? It's a shame that this is the only thing Kaboom put out that expands the canon lore of the source material. The plot stops just as it's getting good.
The Orient Express. Sorry, the text-to-speech voice didn't understand that this was supposed to be a pun.
While traveling to retrieve a cure for Lady Rainicorn's fever, Jake is accused of murdering a passenger on an eerie train. You can see the twist coming from a mile away, and the magical stretching dog being restrained by regular handcuffs is an obvious oversight. But the train's immensely moody vibes bring out Jake's paranoid side. Lady finally gets in on the action in these comics during the rewarding resolution, and I really appreciate the grounded moments in between the madness. I'm a big fan of this goose lady Jake talks to, who values the unusual happenings on this train just because they're a break from its usual goings-on. Lots of little details make this a worthwhile read. Good job, Jeremy Cerise, who I bring up because he wrote the next 2 graphic novels too.
Princess and Princess.
Finn temporarily becomes the princess of the Rock Kingdom and must prevent its council from declaring war on PB and sinking the Candy Kingdom. The world building of the solo Finn quest helps make this one distinct, mainly taking place in a system of underground tunnels that lead to gardens of diamond trees or evil talking doors with Thomas the Tank Engine faces. There's royal conspiracies, a rock-based hierarchy, and lots of hatless Finn. Not a favorite, but I can still praise how different Princess and Princess feels compared to the 10 books that have come before it.
Thunder Road.
Marceline falls in with a gang of cloud biker bros, while Bubblegum challenges them to a race. hoping to stop them from causing a storm above the Candy Kingdom. It's par for the course that this one is well illustrated, but I don't think the plot has enough meat on its bones to fill out about 130 pages, considering that the girls have an extended race for fun after the day is saved. Pair that with the 1-2 punch of Marceline having a liar reveal moment, PB pretending like she doesn't know her, and this one has mid written all over it. Literally.
Marceline the Pirate Queen.
Princess Bubblegum sends Marceline to retrieve a precious object from a band of pirate thieves, traversing their lair with BMO as her navigator. This central dynamic plays out like a little kid hanging out with their cool aunt, showing a caring and determined side of the Vampire Queen throughout the mind-bending Dome Kicker Islands. I feel like some of the other high-tier graphic novels focused on a grand journey would have benefited from showcasing other odd character combos, instead of character plus Jake. Plus, there's so much personality and variety packed into the challenges and obstacles they encounter. Props for also acknowledging how Marcy can just fly or transform into a monster to solve most of her problems here. No pacing problems, poor characterization, or dull original material in sight. Now hopefully the final Adventure Time graphic novel can end this line off on a high note.
Party Bash Blues.
It's fine. 2016 saw quite a few changes to Kaboom's Adventure Time lineup. The ongoing book dropped the backup stories starting with issue 50, the miniseries took a 14-month hiatus, and there was now only 1 or 2 specials coming out each year. July saw the launch of a brand new Adventure Time comic called Adventure Time Comics, a straightforward name that is not confusing at all. This promised a brand new vision of the land of Ooh, and no, it's just more shorts from indie cartoonists. Yay? Look, someone had to have been enjoying these because this lasted 25 issues. Besides a frequent use of inspired 2-page stories, it's just more of the same. You get 2 to 5 brief stories per issue, and it feels like all that anyone wants to write are Finn and Jake romps, escapades with AT's glup kiddos, and the lesbians. There's more generic stock plots or overly kiddie tones, paired with character team-ups you'd have to be a true fan to dream up, like Don John and Tiny Manticore, Goliad and Orgalorg, or the Cosmic Owl and James Baxter. The Horse. For every dull story about our boys fighting Wild Woody, you get something one of a kind, like an origin for Choose Goose that's told as a fable. In an ideal world, this would have reminded me more of the unofficial Ble Zine put together by the crew as the show was wrapping up in 2018. It's a mix between in-universe Mad Magazine style features and character-based comics, pin-ups, and sketches. The whimsy and surrealism you expect is matched with depressing, nihilistic anti-humor.
A dog, a soldier, and an oil magnate walk into a diner. One eats whatever they're given. One enjoys a meal on the house. And one just orders a coffee but shouts, "Hey everybody, lunch is on me." Beyond this, one's life remains largely the same. One dies young, killed 2 tormented years later, having killed 4 themselves. And one exploits the world for all they're worth, but continues shouting diner's lunch, though never joining to eat. The diner opens its doors each day, precious within the community, until it changes hands, and the food and atmosphere go cold. But it is remembered fondly.
What a thigh slapper! Ble undoubtedly benefited from not being sanctioned by Cartoon Network, but it feels like an extension of the show, instead of an imitation. Balanced between faithful and diverting visions in a way that reminded me of my favorite shorts from Adventure Time Comics. I'm going to now talk about my favorite shorts from Adventure Time Comics.
The Greatest Warrior Ever from issue 2.
This tale of Billy contrasts silly dialogue with gorgeous drawings that hold heavy Conan the Barbarian influence. It all turns out to be Finn's self-insert fanfiction, complete with model sheet looking ass drawings. Could this art style just be how Finn sees his world? I smell a conspiracy theory!
Echoes from issue 3.
There's a lot of solid bubbly media from across these 25 issues, but I got the most enjoyment out of seeing Marceline dig into her old feelings for the princess to help the ghosts of her old, incomplete songs pass on. Honorable mention goes to Lost in Space from the same issue. The girls are realistic babes, while Finn and Jake are still loony cartoon boys.
I'm lost from issue 7.
I think the pink elephant protagonist is supposed to be Tree Trunks, lost in the woods while on a hike, but their dialogue is so self-conscious. Cosmo Custodian from issue 16 also stars a new character, this nameless janitor on Mars. But even that feels more identifiably Adventure Time. I'm Lost has almost nothing to do with the license it's attached to, and I love that about it.
The Forgetting Tree from issue 9.
My obligatory Finn and Jake pick. It goes back to the weirdness that a lot of the early backups had, showing how the pair's bond transcends the mystifying properties of this tree. Not very long, but very meaningful.
Sunday Morning from issue 10.
This one depicts a scenic and peaceful hike starring Finn and Billy's girlfriend Canyon. I think it succeeds thanks to its striking autumn vibe, set by an intentionally muddy palette and the paint strokes and splotches used for shading.
Broken from issue 16.
Simon and Marcy take center stage as the scientist fixes a tear in the Hambo doll. The use of a more realistic art style feels very appropriate, helping to sell the realness of the apocalypse quietly happening in the background, adding something new that justifies revisiting this pair.
Visions of Paternity from issue 18.
This is set in a dark, apocalyptic future with a sword and sorcery vibe. Kind of what I thought the flip side was going to be. Heroes have fallen, villains have risen, and one rarely seen character confronts their biggest fear. I will mention them like 3 more times in this video. A terrific aesthetic, deepened by its twist ending.
Hamilton from issue 20.
Okay, let me read the first paragraph and see what we got here. How does a massive blob-like creature of pink gum from a ceiling, dropped in the middle of a post-apocalyptic, unappealing city, through Providence, impoverished and squalor, grew up to be a ruler and a scholar? Oh my god, is this just... Oh, it is. This is cringe and dated, but I say that in the most affectionate way possible. After discovering oddball and experimental shorts like this, I'm glad I decided to make this retrospective definitive and read every Adventure Time comic issue. The last 3 arcs of the ongoing book ask a daring question. What if it was bad? You know, it still looks nice. Ian McGinty's style comes into its own with these sight gags, thicker line art, wacky animal designs, and tendency to draw Finn's backpack with an always visible big white button for some reason. Shelli, Paroline, and Braden return to illustrate 18 main covers, and each of them is its own window into an eccentric quest. They're loaded with little charming outfits and interactions that have so much more interest in doing something compelling with the source material than the issues they advertise. There are occasionally some thigh slappers or bright spots, like Bonnie standing up to Hudson Abadir after he humiliates his daughter with a death day party. On the whole, I couldn't care less about the stories being told. I do not need to know who wins the Best Princess Ever competition or the hot air balloon race. The stakes are low, the chapters blend together, and both end with the same twist of someone being the Ice King in disguise all along. The second arc definitely has more character to it, to the point where there's this long runner about the cast using vocab words that Turtle Princess defines at the bottom of the page. It doesn't fit anyone besides PB, and grinds the pacing to a halt in a way Ryan North's footnotes never did. The way that Boom Studios brought in new writers for each of these 3 arcs not only limits the potential for that talent to improve over time, but also felt like the book was continuing just because it was a few months away from reaching that coveted 75-issue milestone. This felt very apparent with issue 70. After 5 years of having a comic that aims to look and read just like you're watching a Cartoon Network original, why suddenly switch to a whole new art style, especially when it's only for a few months? I wouldn't be complaining so much if there wasn't already another comic where these new visuals would feel far more welcome. It comes across as being static, with simple expressions and layouts, even if the stout proportions and sketchy details are still decently appealing. But I don't blame artist Joey McCormick. He's worked on backgrounds, colors, and props for almost all the coolest looking cartoons from this decade. Amphibia, Inside Job, Velma, Clone High, and Stugo. Even his subscription covers for this arc roll, with all these obscure character variants. Feels like he just had to deal with tight deadlines for the interiors. Peppermint Butler got his own cover, but is nowhere to be seen in the arc. Finn, Jake, and Princess Bubblegum are the only characters from the show present, which at this point is really strange. Every other writer was pissing themselves to throw in their favorite fella with screen time in the single digits. One of the OCs has a decent journey, but unfortunately for them, it happens during this by-the-numbers cloning story. The boys grow tired of cleaning up the Candy Kingdom, and would rather be hanging out at the Adventure Town theme park. making a deal with a wish witch to create obedient doubles of themselves that goes horribly wrong. This isn't the first cartoon slop plot we've seen, but it is the first to be drawn out for 4 issues. Jake's stretching powers are barely utilized in situations where they could have come in handy, Finn is unironically subdued by a light pinch, and there's lines where Finn and Jake's personalities are reversed, and dialogue meant for one was given to the other. I stumbled upon this early interview with Ryan North that ends with him saying, "I'd hate to be writing Adventure Time comics and not be excited about it." And that's the energy I get from this Double Trouble arc. Big, I watched the first few episodes of Season 1 vibes here. I expected a little more continuity from an author who is literally named Kevin Canon. If there's one silver lining to this era, issue 74 slaps. This one-off was written by Connor McCurry from the regular show crossover and illustrated by Jorge Monlongo from that Visions of Paternity short I dug. His angular and noodly line art gets to shine when Magic Man sucks up all the color, stealing Finn and Jake's inspiration. The locations, the citizens, the full-page spreads of Jake's ill-conceived plans, it all feels like Adventure Time, and more importantly, like this ongoing Adventure Time comic series. This being the 3rd single issue of Magic Man Shenanigans helps. Ultimately, that's why volumes 14, 15, and 16 fail. They feel like simple and unremarkable license comics, instead of trying to take advantage of the medium and push this franchise forward. Finally, issue 75 will be covered after the next part. We gotta talk about why Finn was pogging first. In September 2016, it was announced that Adventure Time would wrap up its time on Cartoon Network in 2 short years, giving Boom Studios enough time to plan 3 miniseries that engage with the characters and storylines represented in its final seasons.
Beginning of the end.
This 3-issue arc reads as a substitute series finale for the franchise, dealing with Finn's past, present, and future, as he is pulled out of time and into a realm known as the Vanishing Point. There, Finn is threatened to be erased from history by the dimensional god Chronologius Rex for breaking an oath to Jake that he'll adventure for all time, simply because he just didn't feel like it one day. As Finn argues against the possibility that he isn't a hero, getting glimpses of those who have inspired him and possible paths for him to take, Jake rallies all of his allies together to traverse the crossroads of time and rescue his best buddy. This reads like really good fanfiction. On one hand, it contains obscure references to supplemental material, like Ryan North's character Penelope, Guillermo del Toro's Ford in the Art of Ooh book, and Jake sharing a voice actor with Aquaman from Batman the Brave and the Bold.
Outrageous!
Writer Ted Anderson even went so far as to include Easter eggs that answered the show's unsolved mysteries. He had a theory on what was transmitting the laser that beamed Fiona and Cake in Ice King's head.
I chose to interpret this as a reference to one of my favorite authors, Philip K. Dick, who believed that he was receiving knowledge in the form of an information-rich pink laser beam from a satellite called Valis. So, this satellite, Felis, get it, like cats, is the source of the Fiona and Cake stories, in my version of the universe anyway.
On the other hand, having Finn and Jake step into the past and future to interact with dead characters like Billy and Fern feels purposeful. It contributes towards Finn processing his mortality and accepting the inevitability of change. Beginning of the End became one of my favorite miniseries, as it uses its familiarity with the source material to go beyond simple callbacks and develop the cast. Or at least until it ended on a minor cliffhanger. We don't see Finn and Jake's journey back to the present day. The conclusion works as is. I just wish there was one more issue to bring everything full circle.
Season 11.
Moving on, Season 11 debuted I Was Lying Before! There is a 4th issue of Beginning of the End. It just wasn't published on its own. You can only read it as a part of the trade paperback collection. If you felt like you were just lied to, then so did I. Every cover and solicit of this miniseries claimed it was only 3 parts long. I'm glad it exists, I just wish it wasn't hidden. It's a nice bonus, an alternate take on the ending. Kinda like the end of Evangelion. Hey, wait a minute.
Season 11.
Moving on, Season 11 debuted 1 month after the final episode, Come Along With Me, hit the airwaves. Technically, there were only 9 seasons produced that were packaged into 10, so the title is already questionable. But the intention was for this to be a direct continuation, albeit one made without any involvement from the show's staff. According to Ken Osborne's podcast interview with artist GhostShrimp, there were actually loose plans for another batch of episodes involving mole people to set up one more season before the crew was told to wrap things up with a 44-minute special.
Pardon? Ah! Oh, sorry for interrupting your poop.
I'm sure some concepts were explored in the sequel shows on HBO Max, but it would have been nice for this book to adapt them. I always drew mental parallels between this line of comics I'm covering and IDW's My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. They'd always be side by side on bookshelves, so it's funny that they'd adopt the same post-finale gimmick 1 year later. Because the solicit for issue 2 was released before the episode's air date, an alternate version of it was produced so as to not spoil that Ice King was going to be permanently turned back into Simon, having a set of covers by Julie Ben Bassett, where the issue number references the corresponding season number, is a cute touch too. The first 4 chapters send Finn and Jake to a dark future where Marceline has no memory of Princess Bubblegum and sends 3 mysterious robot henchmen to search for artifacts of her past. The scale is small, the pacing is slow, and none of these storylines that the finale set up are followed up. There's some fun time travel shenanigans with Hudson Abadir, and Meg Casey's textured colors elevate the slightly more grounded art style of Marina Julia, who also illustrated the last arc. Ted Anderson returned to script these issues based on a story by Adventure Time Comics contributor Sonny Liu, before taking over all writing duties by issue 5, and you can feel the bump in quality. Humantown, a settlement of Founders Island citizens from Season 8's Islands miniseries, seeks to live like their primitive ancestors, wanting to isolate themselves from neighboring kingdoms. With the recent destruction of the Treehouse Fort and wanting to spend more time with the robotic clone of his mother, Finn contemplates moving to the new city, before realizing he's being tricked into defending it through a fake robotic monster controlled by the leader Malloy. This and issue 6 nicely build off not only the finale, but the relationships and feelings Finn had surrounding it, having his mother back in his life, being suspicious of Princess Bubblegum's surveillance, feeling regret over not being able to save Fern, and seeking wisdom from Huntress Wizard. I'd think more highly of Season 11 if it was this consistently good, instead of being dragged down by bland opening issues. It concludes with a montage of Finn's friends, helping him construct a new log cabin home, wrapping up the series with a lullaby from Minerva. However, Anderson had mapped out 6 more issues, with the 7th being cancelled after a full script and page layouts had been completed. He wanted to bring in Martin, Samantha, Germaine, and reveal that Dr. Gross was living in Humantown, genetically altering the humans to turn them into adventurers.
Also, Jake would have had a family reunion because I really wanted to write all his kids. Originally, it was going to be him and Lady finally getting married. Cartoon Network specifically said that Jake and Lady couldn't get married because they were, and I quote, a modern couple. I still have no idea exactly what that means.
Marcy and Simon.
Marceline's voice actress Olivia Olson penned this epilogue, where Simon Petrikov begins losing his memories. Hudson tries to reinstate them with an Ice Crown curse, but to prevent his Ice King persona from taking over, Finn, Jake, and Marcy must travel through the multiverse to restore Simon's mind by reuniting him with his beloved Betty. I recall liking the Enchiridion and Marcy's secret scrapbook tie-in Olivia wrote with her father Martin Olson, best known for writing on Phineas and Ferb and in my comments section. Her script here is pretty alright. There's dynamics I dig, like Simon coming to terms with who Marcy has grown up to become and seeing the vampire's father and father figure butt heads. But then you got selfie jokes, folks like Normal Man acting out of character, lots of slow conversations where everyone stands around, the grand return of White Marceline, and of course the ending. You know the tragic fate that befell Betty in Come Along With Me, where she fused with cosmic entity Gulb to save her true love? That gets completely undone, so everyone can have their happily ever after. I know AT is known for conforming to the status quo instead of letting drastic changes stick around, but I prefer when my stories have consequences. Plus, Betty being an unproblematic cure to all of Simon's problems is boring. I prefer how Fiona and Cake's Season 1 framed their relationship as being one-sided, forcing Petrikov to find his own self-worth beyond his old partner.
I could have made the effort to support you the way you always supported me.
Even though Olivia Olson's involvement gives it an air of legitimacy, it's easy to ignore Marcy and Simon now that we have an indisputably canon version of the story it wanted to tell. But to its credit, the arc kept my interest, and took advantage of the vast world that had been established over the show's 9 to 10 season run. Although all 3 miniseries were eventually contradicted, it was refreshing to read comics that rewarded those who kept up with Adventure Time as it came to a close, taking advantage of how these comics outlasted the cartoon by 11 months. Low sales were cited as the reason for the cancellation of Season 11, which would have seemingly become the new ongoing book had it continued. Instead, they shifted to compilations seasons of reprinted content. By 2020, Cartoon Network apparently ended their licensing deal with Boom Studios, as that's when we got our last Ben 10 and Steven Universe publications, two shows that were on their way out. I know Distant Lands wasn't far behind, but the ultimate point of why these comics exist is to promote the cartoon, so why keep it around if there isn't anything to actively promote? But to find the future of these comics, one only has to look to the final lyric of Adventure Time's theme song. The fun will never end. No wait, I think it's distracting keyboard typing.
Go to very distant lands.
So, after 75 mainline issues, 70 miniseries issues, 25 issues of Adventure Time comics, 15 graphic novels, and 14 special issues, that brings us to a grand total of 199 issues, the Adventure Time cover showcase. Look at all these rad early covers. My copy even came with an added bonus, a receipt from Hugo of Melrose Appliance Specialists. I hope you enjoyed your $1,508.64 worth of repairs, Andrew of Malden, Massachusetts. Although these funny books left no impact on the animated series, they led Cartoon Network comics to become a staple of Boom Studios' lineup throughout the rest of the 2010s. Look at that! Two legends side by side. Their work on the ongoing series were notable stepping stones in the careers of Ryan North and Christopher Hastings. They've gone on to write the acclaimed current run of Fantastic Four and the Five Nights at Freddy's graphic novels. I love the range of the latter's work. This video would not be complete without mentioning the tragic passing of Ian McGinty at the age of 38 back in 2023. Although he died of natural causes, according to his obituary, he was known for overworking himself just to make ends meet. McGinty was one of the most prolific pencilers across this comics line, but he was also clearly exploited. As much as I moaned and groaned throughout this video, I think these creatives tried their best with the resources they were given, and it's a shame that folks like Ian weren't treated better by the industry. I especially hope this is the case when it comes to a brand new series published by Oni Press called There's More? Starting in April 2025, Adventure Time is back in comic shops with a new ongoing series featuring a revolving door of both old and new talent on 4-issue arcs and backup stories. We've returned to that early season purgatory where Ice King steals princesses and Finn has both of his arms. We've already got one-shots as well, like a bubbling college special that is finally able to take full advantage of these two being a couple. The first few issues should be out by the time I'm done editing. So what did you think, Future Nick? Okay, do you have any more thoughts to share? Oni has also begun reprinting Kaboom's work in omnibuses. These are the comics as they were originally published, so White Marceline lives to see another day. Some extras from the original volumes were omitted, like behind-the-scenes sections, cover galleries, and some bonus shorts, like the cute Free Comic Book Day 2012 story about BMO learning battle burns that nicely transitions into the very first issue. It should be legally released to the general public, unlike BMO's censored battle burn. The hardcover mathematical versions of Kaboom's first collection even contains an exclusive mini-story I had never seen before, explaining how the creative team made this comic. As it turns out, they used a dimensional travel device to visit Ooh and take photos of the characters. Sorry for lying about scripting and illustrating being involved earlier. I had no idea about Finn and Jake's secret friends that they love a lot, but never mentioned in any of the episodes because it's a secret. Lots of unscanned background info that helped me research for this video is locked behind these versions, such as one of 10 alternate drafts of what became that Marceline flashback in issue 4. The Lich was going to have an origin story, shown to be a 1950s general desperate to win a war who was consumed by ancient magic, including the Bag of Holding. This was scrapped to stay in line with what the cartoon would go on to reveal about the villain, but it did inspire Ryan North to write stories where he didn't have to worry about continuity in the future. The rest is history. Still, volumes 1 and 2 of Oni's compendiums are an easy way to access some of the very best AT comics, on top of already being well priced. Plus, because they use covers in between issues instead of stock assets, I no longer have to see the same 5 Finn expressions over and over again. Currently, there are only plans to re-release 87 issues, but I hope everything, and I mean everything, gets back into print eventually. If you can find the old trade paperbacks used, I also recommend seeking out, from best to worst, Marceline Gone Adrift, The Beginning of the End, President Bubblegum, Playing with Fire, Marceline and the Scream Queens, Fiona and Cake, Marceline the Pirate Queen, Banana Guard Academy, The Urien Express, and Ice King. Really, you can't go wrong with most of these. Besides maybe Bittersweets, volumes 14 through 16, Candy Capers, and at the very bottom, The Flip Side. While I don't think these funny books forever changed how animation is adapted into the medium, or how it's written for all ages, they're an interesting view into an alternate version of AT. One where standalone, guest animated episodes were far more common, it never became quite as introspective, and the continuity and characterizations could be looser. Licensed comic-wise, it's between Archie Sonic overhauling its canon to be in line with the current Sega games, and Simpsons comics continuing to use characters years after they were retired from the show. I now present you with this relevant audio outtake from earlier in this video. Finn, Jake, and the Ice King trek through dungeons created by the Ice King himself, Hudson Abadir, and the Lich. Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You might remember me from such dungeons created by the Ice King, Hudson Abadir, and the Lich. You can definitely still fall in love with this franchise just by watching the nearly 300 episodes it's pumped out. But there will always be something special about seeing the Land of Ooo simultaneously change and evolve both on the screen and on the page. Issue 75, the last ongoing issue published by Boom, reunited 3 teams of writers and artists to tell the story of Finn and Jake's friend Casey falling in love with Princess Ib of the Misfit Potpourri Kingdom. It's a microcosm of what these comics were so good at, getting you to care about brand new characters and stories, while still making them feel meaningful to the ones you already know and love. With a cameo-filled group shot, one more question is asked. What time is it?